Interesting point from this week's Daf Yomi, from discussion that went from Sunday's Daf to Monday's Daf. So we're on Yud Beis Beis, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, and that is regarding intention from a katan, from a minor. Of course, a minor is always listed with cheresh, shota, and katan. We see throughout Shas how these individuals are not considered to be b'nei das. They don't have the mental competence required for different halachic transactions. So we're used to thinking that katan can't do anything in halacha. He can't really perform any halachic transactions. Simple as that. But we see from our Gemara this week that apparently it's not so simple. For Rabbi Yochanan asks, and he beis that maybe if a katan brings a carbon which requires intent, maybe that's valid. The Gemara refines his question. The Gemara explains that certainly if all we had to go on was that this minor, even if he said out loud, he said, I'm hereby bringing this carbon as, let's say it's an ola, for an ola, Rabbi Yochanan is not considering the possibility that that's valid. That's for sure not valid. On the other hand, the Gemara says, if we had two things, if in addition to his statement that I'm doing this as an ola, he also did an action to substantiate that. For instance, when it took the animal from the Daram to the Tzafon, from the south to the north part of the Azara, the proper place for ola, thereby substantiating what he says here, then it would definitely be valid. Rabbi Yochanan never had a question about that, and the carbon would be fine. So already right there we see the Gemara is telling us that it's possible for a katan to supply das, kavana, to do something which requires das. Now the Gemara explains, Rabbi Yochanan is asking about a gray area case. Let's say he just did that action, he brought it to the north, but he didn't say, I'm doing it for ola. So even though apparently he's doing it for ola, but he didn't say so, so Rabbi Yochanan wonders about that case, and the Gemara concludes that on the Torah level that would not be binding. But interesting part to me was that the Gemara is telling us that a katan, under the right circumstances, if he does enough, could supply kavana. And that's very interesting. And so the question really becomes, why is it that in general a katan is unable to perform different halachic transactions? What exactly is the issue? You can't just say, he doesn't have das, so it doesn't count. Because we see from the Gemara that's not true. That if he does enough to indicate, then it's fine. So how should we understand it? So possibly the idea is like this. We know that in Hilchas Shabbos there is a concept called Meleches Machsheves, which really I think brings out the concept of kavana. And that is that the halacha is, if a person goes through the motions, he does the action of one of the 39 forbidden acts of labor, one of the malachas, it doesn't mean he's liable necessarily. He's only liable if it's clear that he really planned this out. His objective was the purpose of the malacha. That constructive purpose of what that particular malacha is, how it was done originally when they built the Mishkan. If he did it for that same constructive purpose, and we see it's clear that that was the connection here. He was doing it for that. Okay, then he's liable. But if not, he's not liable. So it could be that that's normally the issue with the katan. And then Rashi uses a language here. He says that the problem is, if he doesn't actually say it out loud, like how do we know that this katan is connecting his intention with the action that he's doing? In other words, that we all remember being kids, when you're young, you're on autopilot. Of course, the kids can do brilliant things, but they're basically, on autopilot in the sense that, they don't usually have a strong capacity of reflecting and introspecting and that kind of sophisticated planning. So it could be that that's normally the issue, is that the default assumption is that he's not really demonstrating a connection between thought and action. which is what kavanah means here. That's what it requires. However, if he's clearly doing that, if there's no denying, he took the animal to the right place and he said, I'm bringing this as an olah, well then he's clearly doing things like a big boy. He can't deny that he has demonstrated adult, proper kavanah, real das, and so it does work in that case. The carbon is valid. So just an interesting, perhaps changes our perspective a little bit, that we see that it's not so black and white. It's not simply that Katan doesn't have das, so he can't accomplish any halachic transaction. I think we have to explain it on a little more. It's a little more complex than that, and perhaps our explanation is correct, or if you have any suggestion, I'd love to hear that. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.